Andy here, in spirit of helping you build a career you love. Today we're going to talk about how to remember your interview lines, your interview stories, all the things you want to say, right? That's the issue. And you don't want to memorize it because that's a lot of stuff going on. It's a big problem. You got lots of questions. You got lots of stories. You got lots of possible questions they can ask you. And most people get very, very overwhelmed because they're trying to remember everything. But you want to be fluid. You want to be fast. You want to be conversational. You also want to make sure that you have the details. So how do you do that? How does somebody make it sound natural? I promise you, you stick with me today for the little package at least, you are definitely going to know how to do that and how to make it a lot easier on yourself so that you know what you want to say, you know the details and all that good stuff, and you will sound fluent. So this is going to be great. I was thinking about, I could just tell you what I want to tell you and give you the tip and give you the examples, but I thought it might be a little bit more interesting. I was thinking, some thoughts were colliding. I was thinking, what I want to teach them is really kind of how I run live office hours. And maybe I could give them the technique that I use as an example or as a backbone. And what's really funny is you all are now becoming me in these interviews, right? You got some kind of audio, you got some kind of visual because we're doing a lot of stuff on camera. But this technique is going to apply whether you're in person, whether you're on the phone, whether you're on the video. It doesn't even need to be limited to interviewing. It could be about when you're talking to somebody at work. It could be about selling a product, a project, a service, or whatever. So let's talk about the situation here. When I'm at live office hours, here you are. I love this time of week, right? If you're here with me live, great. If you're watching this on the recording, hey to you. But you basically get that I have two formats of the show, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a big live event or if I'm teaching or whatever, but basically there's two formats. I teach like this, right? Where there's something of a script that I'm gonna teach you, a how-to or something of that nature. I literally control the microphone and I'm gonna teach you the steps and the how-tos and all the good stuff that I want to teach you. Then there's the Q&A part. And so we either do one or both or one or the other or both. With the Q&A part, you ask me a question. It's your situation. Andy, what should I do? How would you do this? What advice do you have? Do you have any words on? Whatever it is. But basically, those are the two things and the two ways that I approach it. Now, a lot of you, my beloved community who come here every week, and welcome to the newcomers and welcome to the folks that come week in and week out. But basically you get that you all ask me the same questions every week, right? And that's okay. And that's okay. Right? There's a finite number of problems in job searching and interviewing and salary negotiation, resume writing, and those kinds of things. And each one of you encounters this issue at a different point in your life. So if somebody asked me last week, somebody's going to ask me a similar question, if not the same question this week, that's okay. It makes me feel good to help you. There is absolutely no patina on my enthusiasm or my answers or any of that stuff. So you're going to get the same level of energy. But what I know is you're going to ask me the same questions, or I'm going to teach you about similar topics, or maybe I'm going to teach you a fresh view of a similar topic, but it's basically the same. Now, same thing goes for you, right? In an interviewing scenario, when you go in for an interview, all these companies, they ask you the same questions, right? I've given you in the interview intervention book, which is free if you chip in for the envelope. I've given you the questions that you are likely to get asked, right? So regardless of what your function is, I've basically given you all the questions that an employer could potentially ask you about your behavior, about your history, about your upbringing, about your career, and all that good stuff. Sure, you're going to have some unique questions that are related to what it is you do specifically, if you're an accountant or a marketer or a salesperson or a mechanic or whatever. But basically, you're going to get the same questions. So how is it that you can be ready, even though there are so many of these questions? They basically all ask the same ones. So here, let's talk about how we do that. Now, first thing I want to do, though, is I want to tell you what I don't want you to do. Now, normally I like to save my mistakes and the things I don't want you to do to the end, but for this talk, I moved them up. I got a note card too, and there's two things I don't want you to do because this makes it really, really hard on you. The first thing is, I kind of alluded to this one, is I don't want you to memorize anything. What happens when you memorize it? You sound robotic. It's much, much more difficult to remember everything because you're thinking about words, right? You're thinking about, I need to say this first, I need to say this next, and so on. And that's a lot of stuff to remember. What also makes it very difficult for some of you, this second piece, is people are trying to tell you to put it in interview speak, right? Use the STAR technique. This, say this, right? Like all this stuff that you got going through your head. But just imagine for a second if at any moment in time, even no matter how much duress you're under, that your body just did what it was trained to do, right? As you're telling a story, you're telling the story about what you were trained to do. Imagine that. The protocols and the procedures and the methodologies and the things like that you have been living day in and day out, project in and project out. It makes no difference how many widgets you created. There's a formula to what you do. You've been trained. But instead, you're trying to convert what is very fluid and story-like into something that is mechanical and makes you tongue-tied. Right? You ever see a trainer on a video do a video, whether it's recorded before the studio audience like we're doing right now, or whether they're trying to talk to the camera because you're not sitting there and they're very stiff, or they got a lot of jump cuts or whatever, right? They're having dialogue with themselves, right? They're not speaking with you. They're not having a conversation with you. They're not getting connected with you. They're all in their own head. And this is what happens to a lot of you in an interview. So here's what I do each week. So let's talk about me, and we're going to talk about you. All right, so first thing is, I mentioned that I have a session today where I'm teaching, and sometimes I teach, right? We do workshops and things like that. Well, I want you to know that my tip for you and what I use is I just know my outline, okay? So if I'm teaching, I just go off my outline, right? So you might hear me say, hey, today, here's what we're going to talk about. This is a problem. This is the problem you have, or here's the aspiration you have. Here's the promise I'm going to give you. Here's how I want you to do it. Here's all the mistakes you're going to make. Here's a bonus tip, and let's recap. Okay, something like that. There you go. There's your formula for anything I teach you. Basically, although I got really crazy today and I moved the mistakes up top. Basically, you have an outline. And I want you to think about anytime you answer something, you have an outline. So when I give you something, when it's scripted like it is today, and I have the microphone in total control, I go through the points I want to tell you. I don't memorize each stage of it. I'm just talking with you about the things I know you need to know about how to do this. Okay, so there's an outline to it. Makes things very easy. But what about when I get a question, right? It comes at me, and it's theoretically a unique question, maybe one I've heard before, maybe one I've anticipated, maybe one I've seen variations of. Now, immediately, I'm asked a question about something, it's a situation, and I have to process it. I have to look at the data you're giving me. I have to make sure that, because you only have so many characters, and like when a person asks you an interview question, they're only asking you a question. They're not providing you tons and tons of information unless they're asking you to do a case study and they're providing all of that. But basically, I then have to fill in the assumptions. And then I have to think about answering your particular question, but I also have to think about, well, hang on, what if my assumptions were wrong? And maybe they asked me something, but there's a different variation of what they need. So I try to give you multiple variations, and what that also does, not only does it cover the basis for you, but it also, because this is a teaching show, it helps all the other people that will encounter that scenario, whether they've encountered it or not. At some point, they're going to encounter it or a variation thereof. So then I expand it, and I go through the different scenarios. And then what do I normally say to you when we do a Q&A? Hey, there's 3 things we have to be aware of. There's three different scenarios. There's 3 things I'm going to tell you. And as I'm saying this out loud, what is it doing for you? Okay, Andy's going to go through 3 steps. Andy's going to go through 3 scenes. He's going to do something. What's it doing for me? It's telling me, okay, 1, 2, and 3. It's giving me out loud my outline, or something that is going to be easier for me to remember. So that positive reinforcement, because it came out of my mouth, you now know it's been framed for you. You know where we are in the story at any moment in time, and so do I. Okay, so that's really kind of how I do live office hours. Now, I'm processing very quickly. I'm very experienced, but I have been trained. I do this every day. It's what I'm fashioned to do. So I can on command run through that very quickly. But aren't you all a masters of your trade? Right? You project managers, haven't you done umpteen projects? And even if you've done one project, you've probably lived it for a long time. You know what you're doing, right? So rely on your areas of expertise. So the tip that I want you to know is make sure that you run through your outline in your head. Now, I talked about my situation, which is I'm either going to give you a scripted story like this one, and this story, while scripted, is not scripted. It's outlined, right? Or you're going to ask me for a situation like a Q&A, and I'm going to give you that. But what about you? What kind of questions do you get asked? Now, I've told you in the past that there are only two types of interview questions. There's ones about your past, and there's ones about your future. But there's three formats that an employer or an interviewer can use to ask you about your past or to ask you about your future. So while I want you to have outlines, I want to show you exactly what I mean in each of the different scenarios that you will face. So what are the types of questions that you're going to get? All right, you're going to get behavioral. These are questions about your past. Right? You're going to get a question about a specific project. These are questions about your past. And then there's situational questions. These are questions about what if scenarios or the future or how would you handle or whatever. Now, the behavioral interview questions, for example, those are, right, tell me about a time when. Now, they're about your past, but they're vague, and they give you control of the microphone because you get to pick the story that you want to tell them about something that was disorganized, the disagreement you had with the customer or your teammates, right? Or something that you did, a challenge you overcame, a failure you had, and so on. However, you know that you're going to likely be asked those kinds of questions. So all you need to do in advance is, which story do I think best suits me to tell this interviewer because of the company they work for, or the role I'm interviewing for, or the best story I have if I don't have something that aligns to one of those two. Now, you get to choose that. Now, on the behavioral stuff, what's the outline? Well, let me tell you what isn't the outline. Now, I put a video out that maybe Kara can share here. If you're watching this on the recording, I'm sure we're going to put it up in the card or something like that, right over there, about how to answer any behavioral interview question. I have this video. It is well worth watching. I don't want to go into the whole outline and all the details and all the examples and all the stuff that I gave you in that video. I'd like you to watch it, but I do, for completeness sake, want to talk about something very, very specific here. Lots of times people ask me about the STAR technique. They say, well, that's an outline, right? STAR, situation, task, action, result. It's the worst way to answer a behavioral interview question. I don't care what anybody tells you. I don't care if a recruiter says, we like the STAR technique. Let me tell you why it's really bad. So if you use that outline, it starts with your situation, which means it starts with your example. And what happens if you pick a bad example to tell the interviewer? If I don't like your example, you don't have a job. Okay? So I don't like that scenario. Now, you picked one example. Some of you are my age. Got a birthday coming up soon, but been working for 30-some years. Do you have any idea how many examples I can choose from when somebody asks me about a disagreement that I've had, or how I motivated somebody, or what I think leadership is, or whatever? Right? I have many. I have more stories than there are people on this session, right? And so do you. So if you pick the wrong one and you go into, well, here's the situation, here's what I was doing, here's the action and the steps that I took, and here was the result, and it's not a good story, then they're not going to like it. So I would rather you have a different kind of outline, one that is much, much more simple for you to remember, similar in style. But I'd rather you share with me what you think, right? Can you just talk like a human being for a second and just tell me what your philosophy is on disagreeing? So if somebody asks me a behavioral question, I know I'm going to use the example where Susie and I, on this project, we encountered this issue and we had a disagreement. I already know what the example is. I already know what it is because I lived it. I just want to tell the employer or the interviewer, well, here's my philosophy on disagreement in general, because you want to share that up front. You don't have to run on for 8 minutes about your philosophy, but you need to share it, because what the sharing of your philosophy or your thoughts does is it tells me this is how Andy is going to behave all the time, irrespective of the scenario he is now about to give me. Okay? So you're neutralizing, right? It's kind of like all you finance geeks. It's like a stop loss order, right? You like the lowest, baddest thing that can happen to you is they don't like your scenario, right? Well, now you're saying it doesn't matter if you like my scenario. If you like the way I think, because what's the first thing they hear and the last thing they hear, that's what they remember. The stuff in the middle is harder to retain. So then you take them through, and here's what happened with me and Susie, and here was the outcome. Now, outcome could be a result. It could be a result in what you learned, right? So here's what I think. Here's what I did. Here's what happened. Here's what I think. Here's what I did. Here's what happened. Okay? That sounds like human speak, not interview speak. There's your outline. Whatever your story is, you go pick it. But you don't have to remember all the details. All right, wait, let's transition to this one. How about this one? Let's say I got a specific project, okay? I got a specific project, and no one cares about my project. They just want me to work harder. Somebody says, hey, Andy, I love that project that I see on your resume. Can you tell me how you did that? What if you did what you were trained to do, what you were fashioned to do, what you've been doing your entire life as a project manager? You say, oh, man. So now what? You got the microphone again, scripted. What do you need? Here's an outline. What's the outline related to? A sales process, cooking the accounting books, right? Marketing something, selling something, running project, whatever, right? Well, project manager. Hey, you know what? I'm glad you picked that. That was a classic software development lifecycle implementation where we went through, the 7 stages. We gathered we assembled a team. We gathered the requirements, right? We architected it, designed it, coded it, quality assurance, tested it, converted it, maintained it, so on and so forth. And so I'm going to tell you that you're going to get those 6 or 7 pieces. And actually, the business issue was, and we were having some issues with customer service. We were going to put in a customer relationship management system. It was a $1 million project. There was ultimately 50 people on the project. Took us 10 months. And here's what I did. And I'm going to take you through, boom, boom, boom. You gave them the outline. You have the outline, you told them what you're going to tell them, and now you fill in the details in an organized fashion, and you will never lose yourself. And now all you need to do is tell them. Now, some of you might say, well, Andy, that was 10 years ago. Okay, first thing is, if it's on your resume, I want you to remember the details, okay? Now, here's what I do when I have to tell a story about something. I would go get my resume. I would look at everything on my resume, and I would think about when I did that highlight, when I did that project, when I was at that company, when I was working with those people. What was it like? What season was it? What was the weather like? What was the color of the furniture? What was the business problem? Who was involved? What vendors were we using? Go back. Go back. Reflecting is nice, right? Just think about, here's your little tip. Go back. When you've got a behavioral interview question where you get to choose the story, or you've got the specific scenario that they've asked you about, and you get, right, they've chosen the story for you, but it doesn't matter. It should be one of your favorites. Because if the dang thing is on your resume, it should be something that markets you, and it should be something you should be falling all over yourself to talk about, right? Okay, so now if you think about it in advance and you're reflecting, because this is just good interview prep, I got a little tool for you. Maybe up in the card over there on the recording, and Kara can drop it in the little chat, called my Career Achievements Journal. My Career Achievements Journal is going to help you understand the specifics that employers will enjoy hearing about, that will bring details, color, and bring your stories to life with the right information that is most germane for them to know and understand, so that they can visualize and paint a picture for themselves. And the other little thing that you can do is you grab your resume and say, well, this one right here, you can see it was a $5.3 million project, and it lasted 10 months. 10 years, whatever it was, right? So you've got the little crutch that you can grab. So for behavioral interview questions, you use the little 3-prong outline in the video. Hopefully you'll go watch that. And if you're telling about a specific story or a specific project, talk about what you were fashioned to do. If you're marketing something, what are the marketing tactics? Just walk them through it. 6 marketing things that we did. Boom, boom, boom. Right? Here's what I did. 1, 2, 3. Here's what we learned. Here's what happened. All that good stuff. Right? Focus on the outline. Focus on the methodology. Focus on your protocols. And it is so much easier for you to be able to send that out. And it will sound like a conversation. It'll be fluid and fast. Okay, now we still got one left. This one here is the situation. And you're gonna say, well, Andy, I don't know what this is yet. They're gonna give me a scenario. I'm telling you, you already know what it is. Why? Because if you're a project manager, they're gonna say, hey, Andy, how did you, we've got this project we'd like you to implement. How would you go about this? Or you're a salesperson. How would you go about researching and targeting new prospects to sell them this widget? Right? You're going to get something that is in your lane. And you've been doing this your whole life. So what do? You immediately, in your brain, first thing that happens is you insert your methodology, your protocols, your outline, your whatever. So, well, the first thing that I need to do is what's the issue? So maybe we'll need to go and segment the customers. And then once we do that and we evaluate where 80% of our dollars are coming from 20% of the customers, then we're going to implement, we're going to design, architect, we're going to develop it, we're going to test it, we're going to whatever, blah, blah, blah. Right? You insert your methodology or your protocols. It could be 1 step, it could be 5 steps, it could be whatever it is that they asked you about. Whatever this scenario is. But these are the questions that ask you to lay it out or troubleshoot it on the fly. So it's the same kind of thing I do when you ask me a question. I insert all the tactics. Basically, I go into this little skull-shaped kingdom up here, and I think about all the things that I know to be true about whatever it is you asked me. But I have to assemble it in an orderly fashion so that you can understand what I need you to do, and you are trying to relay what it is that you would do to the people who asked you. Okay? So everything goes back to, where'd my card go? Right here. It goes back to your outline. Everything that you do. Now, I want to give you a little bonus tip here. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. On the situationals, okay? So when you have these right here, and you could even do it for these specific projects, but when you are asked to give them a technique, how would you go about this? Here's your scenario. What would you do? The what would you do questions. Okay, now you got your outline, right? I've got this woman who I work with who is a client of mine, a one-on-one client, and she's pretty awesome. She's interviewing for chief revenue officer positions. And she was interviewing with this technology company for a CRO position. And this particular technology company was an AI based organization that had an open source software that was used by a lot of people. Now, the open source is free. So you got people that are using this stuff for free, except they're now going to be building on top of this with enterprise solutions, and they want to sell it. So unlike somebody just going to market and selling a product, there's some different challenges. When they ask her, hey, how would you go about selling this? What would you do? That's a situation, right? This is just an example. But the tip is, I want you to tell them what you would do using your outline. The bonus tip, the advanced tactic, is to insert the problems that they are going to encounter along the way. So here's what I want you to do. If you do this, I guarantee that you will floor your interviewers. And you're going to get credit whether they knew about the problems or not. And here's what I mean. Okay, so instead of her saying, well, first thing that we need to do is we need to figure out our customers, who's using what. That's right. And then we also need to go to the market and see what types of organizations we're going to target, whether we're going to go by industry, solution line, or whatever. Okay, you do all that stuff up front. Then, before we can actually start marketing the product, well, we're going to have an education problem, right? So, because we are going to have to educate people who already use this for free on why they need to actually buy something, so we're actually going to have to show them. So we wouldn't normally need to do this. We now are going to have some webinars and webcasts for our existing user base, because they're not even our customer base. They're simply users of our free software. So we have an extra problem. Then once we do that, we're going to encounter this other issue here. And here's how I would solve that, or here's how I would address that. Now, you could do one of two things with this bonus tip. She, in her scenario, had never encountered this before. She's never had to do this. So as you're telling your story, you just say it matter-of-factly. Well, of course we're going to encounter that, right? People who are using this stuff for free aren't going to want to start paying for it, right? So we're going to have to do this. Or if she has done this in the past, say, well, I know we're going to encounter that problem because when I did that over at company XYZ, we tried to do this and we encountered this issue, and here's how we addressed it and fixed it. Okay, so if you've got it in your experience and at your disposal, then you explain that. If you don't, you just say it matter-of-factly. And what did I just say about it doesn't matter if they know the problem exists or not? If you proactively called out the issues, they're gonna think you're a genius whether they knew it or not. If they knew it, they'll be like, that's good catch. If they didn't know it, they'll be like, oh my goodness, yeah, we didn't even think about that. Now imagine how much of a genius you'll be if they didn't think about it. So it doesn't matter. What you don't want is you don't want them giving you the problems along the way. You want to call them out as you walk through your outline. Okay, so how do I retain all that stuff? The only thing that I want you to retain is your outline. Sure, when they ask you, tell me about a time when you organized something. Yeah, I want you to know the project. When they point to your resume and they say, hey, Andy, tell me about that implementation right there. Yeah, I want you to have reflected, but I don't want you obsessing. I don't want you writing this all out. It's okay to talk it out and listen to yourself. And how does that sound? You will be far better off if you do that. And then the situationals, well, you don't know what they're going to ask you, but all you need to do is fall back on your outline, your protocols, your methodologies, and everything that you have been doing since the beginning of your work history, or for however long you've been doing it. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. We will have some links. I hope that serves you. It makes it a lot easier. I ran through this talk. It took me about 3 or 4 minutes to draft the whole thing, and then it took me about 5 minutes to just kind of talk it through to make sure everything made sense. And then I went through it one more time, just talked it out loud to notate some of the things I wanted to point you to. That's it. That's the exact amount of time I put into that. So imagine you do this every day of your life. You're in an interview. They're asking you about stuff you did. You should be able to pull it together pretty quickly. All right. Hope that helps you.